Governments always repeat the same lines. We are working for your financial freedom. We bring you stability. We provide growth. We create opportunities. But when you look at history with just a bit more attention, you see a much darker reality behind those bright words. Because for hundreds of years, states have been playing the same game, using hidden financial tricks to keep ordinary people poor, while pushing wealth and power upward. In short, they make the poor even poorer and the rich even richer. And here is the most surprising part. These tricks are not new. They simply change their makeup. In some eras, they take different names. In others, they are decorated with new concepts. But the final objective never changes and is always the same. Move wealth upward, keep the majority dependent. Now let's look at the oldest, simplest, yet most effective trick: inflation. When a state spends more than it collects through taxes, it faces two options. 1. Tax the public honestly and admit the truth, which is political suicide. 2. Or choose a method that seems smarter but is far more destructive, secretly devaluing the currency. In other words, creating inflation. One of the best historical practitioners of this tactic was the Roman Empire. In the 3rd century AD, the empire was struggling with internal rebellions on one side and frontier wars on the other. As military expenses grew, the silver in the treasury began to disappear. The solution? Reduce the pure silver content of the denarius. Coins that were once almost pure silver were lowered to 70%, then 50%, then down to 10%. What remained was almost entirely copper. Only a thin silver wash was applied on top. The Roman people were told nothing. The state insisted the money is the same, but everyone holding those coins paid the heavy price. Prices skyrocketed. Savings evaporated. Wages couldn't keep up. The economy began to rot. This was the first major silent tax in history. What central banks print today, Rome diluted with silver back then. When we move into the Middle Ages, the trick changes, but the purpose stays the same. Kings of England, France, and Spain, unable to fund their wars, knocked on the doors of wealthy merchants and declared, "You will lend to the state." These loans were not voluntary. The refusal was punished. Even if repayment was promised, it often came late, or in devalued currency, or never arrived at all. Kings financed their palaces, feasts, and wars. Merchants lost their capital. This was outright coercion, disguised as patriotic duty, and it worked for centuries. By the 17th century, states discovered a new trick, using the entire financial system for their own advantage. In 1694, Britain was in the middle of a war with France, and its treasury was dry. The solution was the creation of the Bank of England. The state sold bonds to the wealthy. In return, it promised secured interest payments. Where would this interest come from? From the taxes paid by ordinary people. The mechanism was brilliantly simple. The rich lent money to the state paid them interest, and the public funded that interest through consumption and labor. This system still stands at the center of the modern world. Government debt is marketed as a safe investment, but that safety doesn't come from state power. It comes from the public's taxes, labor, and consumption. Today, governments borrow trillions of dollars. They issue bonds, sell them to banks, funds, and even foreign powers. They tell the public words like infrastructure, jobs, and social programs. But in reality, much of that borrowed money goes to defense contractors, major state-connected corporations, banks, and financial giants. And when it's time to repay, taxes are raised, money is printed, social programs are cut. In summary, debt is assigned to the public, while the profits flow to bondholders. In the 2008 global crisis, banks pushed the system to the brink with toxic mortgage products. The world was dragged into economic collapse. Who paid the bill? The public. Who survived and grew stronger? The same banks. They emerged even bigger and more central after the crisis. The name of the game was very simple: privatize the gains, socialize the losses. Governments introduced huge bailout packages, pumping taxpayer money into the system to save banks. And the public was told, we had to do this to save the system. Today, millions across the US, the UK, Europe, and elsewhere trust in the same model. They pay premiums to the state for decades and believe the system will take care of them in old age. But most governments do not actually save that money. They spend it immediately and leave behind nothing but a government IOU. So the system works like this. Today's workers pay, the state spends, future generations are expected to cover the gap. In official language, this is called the pension system. But in reality, it is hardly different from an intergenerational Ponzi scheme. And it works until the population ages. When that happens, retirement ages are raised, premiums increase, benefits are cut, payouts are eroded by inflation. Then governments step forward and call all of this a reform. History repeats the same linguistic pattern. Inflation is called growth. Forced loans are called duty. Government debt is called investment. Bank bailouts are called stability. Pension cuts are called structural adjustments. The language changes. Reality doesn't. Wealth flows upward. This trick has worked for centuries because most people don't know economic history. They don't understand how financial systems operate. By the time they see the trap, it's too late. In recent decades, governments and central banks have adopted far more sophisticated methods. The biggest example, quantitative easing, QE. After the 2008 crisis, central banks opened the taps. Trillions of dollars of money without backing were printed. Government bonds and mortgage-backed securities were purchased. The public was told, "We're saving the markets. The economy must not collapse." What actually happened? Stock markets soared. Real estate exploded in price. Bonds gained massive value. But who owned most of these assets? The wealthy. Meanwhile, the middle class was left with rising rents, higher living costs, shrinking wages, and assets that lost value. QE saved the financial system, but only for those at the top. The public paid the price through inflation and the rising cost of living. One of the government's favorite tricks is using indirect taxes instead of visible ones. These include sales taxes, fuel taxes, fees, and, most importantly, inflation. When prices rise faster than wages, it means you are paying more tax, just without calling it tax. Governments love inflation because it reduces the real value of their debt. No one holds them accountable, and the public rarely understands what's happening. You may think you're richer because your salary is higher, but if your purchasing power falls, you are actually poorer, meaning the annual raise in your salary has no real value. Inflation is not an arithmetic mistake. It is the system itself, one of the oldest and most effective tricks governments use. On the surface, all regulations appear to be for public safety, but history shows again and again, in the 19th century railroad companies, in the 20th century oil giants, and today's tech and finance giants, all shape the rules to match their interests. The logic is simple. If you can't win the game, buy the referee. Just like in the series Peaky Blinders, why struggle within the rules when you can control the people who write them? Governments show regulations as a shield for the public, but behind the curtain, the biggest corporations carve out loopholes that protect themselves and suppress competition. The public sees safety, insiders see profit. During World War I and World War II, governments told citizens, buy war bonds. It's your patriotic duty. People genuinely wanted to support their nations. Nothing wrong with that. But these bonds also became risk-free, high-return investments for the wealthy, guaranteed by future taxes. This pattern hasn't changed today. In the 21st century, trillions spent on the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were financed through debt. Who benefited? Defense contractors, banks, bondholders. Who paid? The middle class, the taxpayers. The war ends, but the interest on the debt continues for generations. Another powerful trick is complexity itself. Thousands of pages of tax laws, financial instruments, even professionals struggle to explain. Budgets packed with hidden items. All of this serves one purpose: to make it impossible for ordinary people to track where money flows. Complexity is the most effective camouflage of the modern age, because you cannot resist a wealth transfer you cannot see. In ancient Rome, the trick was hidden in diluted silver coins. Today, it is hidden in long reports, complex balance sheets, acronyms, fund mechanisms, market-friendly jargon. The trick hasn't changed. It has simply become harder to read and almost impossible to notice. To understand why the system keeps making you poorer, just look at the facts. Inflation eats your savings. Government debt grows every year. Bailouts activate the moment markets shake. Central banks manipulate money supply. And political costs return to the public as indirect taxes. This entire structure works with one aim: you work more and own less. The financial elite works less and earns more. This is not a flaw in the system. This is the system itself. Tricks change from era to era, but the mechanism never changes. Rome diluted its coins. The people became poorer. In the Middle Ages, forced loans crushed merchants. Today, inflation and debt crush households and the middle class. Names change, methods change, but the result stays the same. And here's the bitter truth. Most people never notice these tricks. They think inflation is natural. Taxes are inevitable. Bailouts are acts of mercy. Government messages are truth. But the biggest trick is this: ignorance. A society disconnected from economic history cannot recognize manipulation. When the past is forgotten, the future is looted the same way, again and again. This is why elites never want the public to learn finance. Because financial education is resistance. Economic history is a weapon. If you know the tricks, manipulation weakens. What should you take from this video? 1. Always look behind the headline. When a decision is announced, first ask who benefits. 2. Remember that inflation is not fate, it is policy. 3. Build real assets. Paper money melts, solid assets don't. 4. Never forget that the system serves itself, not you. History may not repeat word for word, but it certainly crushes those who fail to learn its lessons. The mechanism that destroyed the wealth of Roman citizens still operates today and always will. The only difference is that today it is much more complex, much quieter, and much better hidden. Only one question remains. Will you notice it in time? If what I've shared today helped you see the world from a different perspective, don't forget to subscribe. Because history always has an answer. You just need to look from the right angle. And I'm here to help you find those answers buried in the dusty pages of financial history.